All right, welcome to Comfortably Uncomfortable. You've got Sandy and Alex here, and we are here to empower women to choose courage over comfort by getting comfortably uncomfortable. We get real and cut through the bullshit. Are you ready to get a little weird? Because we're going to laugh, sweat, cry, and grow together.
No topic is going to be TMI. Well, maybe for me, but not for Sandy. We complement each other in that way. Okay, so are we ready?
Well, yeah, duh, I am, but are you?
Okay, let's go. The one with Rhya. Today, we are looking forward to a chat with Rhya Passion, a licensed dietitian nutritionist with an integrative functional approach. She works with both adults and children, applying nutrition science to support the body as a whole. Her practice focuses on gastrointestinal conditions, autoimmune diseases, weight issues, food sensitivities, and other chronic inflammatory conditions. She's also a female entrepreneur. We love those. And her has her own practice in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, but takes clients virtually all across the country. Please note. So we'll dig into a little bit how she and I work together. But for now, let's welcome her and get a little bit uncomfortable today.
Comfortably.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, comfortably uncomfortable together.
Yeah, of course. I mean, as you know, I get very excited to speak to people and pick their brains. So especially somebody who's coming from a perspective of a dietitian can create all sorts of fun, comfortably uncomfortable situations. So very much looking forward to this. And as always, we like to start off establishing the why. So you can introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit of why you became a dietitian or why you are on this podcast and spending your time with us two crazies over here, or just kind of lead us through a little bit of why you're here today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. So as far as my journey, maybe like many other providers, I just had a lot of health struggles myself, and most of my family has some sort of autoimmune disease. And so it just became a passion of mine kind of naturally when I felt like I was constantly hitting a brick wall, visiting doctor after doctor and not really getting help, not really just feeling like I was not empowered to understand what was happening with my body and help myself or help others around me. And I wanted to do it so I wanted to first learn to help myself, and then I felt like I could pay it forward and help others. And so I just kind of pursued, I wanted to do it in a really legit way. And so I decided to get my master's in nutrition. My undergrad is in pre-med biology. So it was sort of a natural transition. And so that's kind of how I got here, was really just fueled by my family's own struggles.
I love it. We love science over here, or I do. So this makes me very excited. So speaking of science and speaking of dietetics and nutrition, and I'm just going to come out and say it. So you are a licensed dietitian nutritionist. Can you help us understand the differences between somebody who calls themselves a nutritionist or a nutrition coach versus a licensed dietitian?
Yes,
sure.
Please.
So there's so many. I can't even keep up now with all the different certifications and programs. And I really looked at a lot of different things when I was kind of considering my path. And the main difference is that I can give nutrition advice to someone with a diagnosed medical condition. So if somebody comes in with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, or diagnosed food allergies, or even like Hashimoto's, which I work with a lot, autoimmune hypothyroid, I am allowed to counsel them and give nutritional advice for medical conditions rather than just very general nutrition education. I can also do nutrition education, but I can provide what's called medical nutrition therapy. And so that's a little bit different. I can also, not that I do this anymore, but I'm also trained in tube feeding and intravenous feeding and those really crazy, complicated things that I don't actually enjoy. But that's kind of the difference there.
Yes, absolutely. So I call myself a nutrition coach because I work with dietitians and we collaborate in this idea of I will offer you and help you with behaviors and habit stacking,
Yeah.
all things that we've talked about. But when there comes to be a wall of saying, hey, let's go get some labs, or let's, set you up with a dietitian to be able to fill in those gaps where I can't. So I
Right.
want to just put that out there of like, we work together. And this is where I'm
Absolutely.
excited to meet somebody else and say, yes, this is all about collaboration.
Yeah.
Now comes the fun part, because we could talk about all things under the sun. And Alex and I have explored a little bit about talking about my views on detox and my trigger word of what that means when you say detox
Yeah.
and and sugar. But what we wanted to focus on with you is this whole idea of elimination diets. It's a hot topic. I mean, you see it everywhere, and everyone under the sun is gluten intolerant. I mean, we joke as moms of like, what do I bring to school now? It's got to be gluten free, dairy free, nut free, everything free. And so
Mhm.
right off the bat, I just like, when we say that and we talk, like, throw that out there, what's the first thing that comes to your head as far as like, what does that mean to you as a mom, as a professional, as a friend? And how, I'm sure you get all this question all the time of like, what's the healthiest diet, or what should I be doing?
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. There's definitely so much information out there. It's just really hard to keep track of. And a lot of people are very confused about what to eat, understandably so. And I think I can come at it from a couple of different angles. My perspective might be somewhat different than what you'd expect, but my whole family has autoimmune disease, like everybody on, at least on my dad's side, and then a little bit on my mom's side as well. So my kids are gluten free, and they have been for most of their lives. My younger one's been gluten free her whole life, and she's just turned 9. So I am that mom, like that annoying mom, like that you're probably talking about. And at
Did
some
I say
point
annoying?
they're
I mean,
gonna,
it
no,
might be
I mean,
annoying. I meant more
no,
like
I totally get it. I mean, I totally get where you're coming from, because I don't want to be that person. But in my family, it's just sort of like, I know what I went through, and I'm kind of at the point for me where it's just like not worth it. It's not that I couldn't eat gluten if I didn't want to. I have a couple other things that I know, like my limits, like I can have a little and I'm okay, but I just can't overdo it. And so I try to teach that to my kids as well. But there is a point where they're going to be unleashed in the wild, and I totally get that. And they're gonna do whatever they do, and they're gonna have to figure it out too. But that's a decision I made for my family more as like prevention, because I have fared probably the best out of my family, but there are other people that have just not, it's just been really hard for them, and they've had a lot of health struggles, and changing their diet has made a really huge difference. So I can kind of come at it from that perspective and say, on one hand, I don't want people to feel like shamed or bad if they feel like, they're just grasping at straws, but they don't know what else to do. Right. And they're just like, I'm just going to try gluten free. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, it's not a silver bullet in all cases, but it can be clinically applicable. And like in Hashimoto's, there's plenty of research on gluten and thyroid antibodies and that molecular mimicry. And that's really important and can make a huge difference in bringing your antibodies down. So there are clinical applications for it. But then I get what you're saying too. We don't want to be on this bandwagon where everybody needs to be on this restricted diet. And I get a lot of those clients too, where they come in and they're already on an autoimmune protocol, which is extremely restrictive. My goal is like, let's add in as much as we can without provoking your symptoms. That would always be my goal for every single person, because a food sensitivity is not a permanent issue. And in some cases, it's more of a symptom of a deeper gut issue. And so when we really like resolve things, some of those can go away. And so
Mhm.
I am constantly educating my clients on like, yeah, it's okay to go there. And in fact, it may be clinically appropriate, but it's usually for a temporary purpose. And then once we settle things down in the body, the inflammation's calmed down, we can start to reintroduce things. And that way you get the most variety and you're less likely to have deficiencies.
So, do you get concerned if someone's on a gluten-free diet for a long time, whether it's by choice or not, and then they start adding it in? Are they automatically going to have just hypersensitivity to it if they like start to add it back
Um,
in?
so that's a good question. I would say generally no. It's more
Okay.
like your body has settled down, so you're now realizing how your body actually responds to it. It's
Right.
kind of
Right.
like if you lived in the jungle and you ate McDonald's, you'd probably have a pretty severe reaction, but
Yeah.
it's not because you really should be eating that, it's
Yeah.
because your body is like wasn't prepared. Like it wasn't like,
Right.
it's just like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah.
And so So I think sometimes, I mean, but I would say for the most part, it's more just that's your body's real reaction. And when you have given it kind of a clean slate, it's more
Mm-hmm.
obvious when that's the only one thing you've changed.
Right.
So I hear you saying, and I love the way you're so politically, inclusive about this. Here I am, and I'm like, I'm gonna get it to you straight. This is what I hear. Of like, I get the question all the time. Gluten's unhealthy. Carbs are
Mm,
unhealthy. It's
no,
bad.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want a registered dietitian. I mean, I think we're on
Yeah.
the same track here. So I just want to hear you say it of like
Yeah.
the source in itself. Is it good or bad?
No, it's not just, yeah, there's not like a
Yeah.
specific food or a specific item. And when people do have an actual sensitivity, what I've found through labs, not just my own, observation, but is that people can have a sensitivity to gluten or just to wheat itself, or actually to the herbicides that a lot of wheat is sprayed with if it's not
Huh.
organic. So it can, especially in children, I see that a lot where there's actual like toxicity from that. So it really can be any or all of those pieces. And so yeah, it's not only is it not just the food, but it's like which piece of it is it, and you
Right.
can't really identify that without doing labs and understanding that.
One of the most fascinating parts about our conversation, I thought, was the data that you do use. Because
Mhm.
for me, I mean, just naive in the space, oh, nutritionist, dietitian, again, like so happy you clarified that for all of us because there's so much confusion. But I didn't realize that you actually use blood work and there was saliva testing that we could do. And I would love for you to touch on that a little bit because I mean, personally, I had no idea that
Yeah.
how useful those
Yeah,
were.
it's not, I wouldn't say it's really common in my space, but I made it part of what I do because I truly feel like it's so important. And
Mm-hmm.
I have additional training in functional medicine, and so with that comes, the training that I received is actually, it's more targeted towards doctors who are used running labs, but as a
Okay.
dietitian, there are labs I can run under supervision of a physician. I can't technically like order anything, but I can order under a physician's approval. And
Okay.
so as soon as I learned what I was doing, I mean, I use them all the time because it is so much more helpful in sorting through sometimes just layers and layers of stuff that people are dealing with, and health issues. So I do, probably what I do the most is stool testing because I deal with autoimmune and GI conditions,
Wait,
and
wait,
Mm-hmm.
the
wait.
gut.
There you go,
Just so you know.
Sandy.
Yep. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
Y'all, you heard
Yeah.
it. Your poop. Your
Your
poop.
Yeah.
poop.
We did a whole episode on poop, and I'm going to
Yeah.
talk more about poop. But in case you
Oh
were
yeah.
wondering, stool equals poop. I
Yeah.
just like to say poop.
And
So
Yeah.
Sandy's obsessed with saying it. So
Yeah.
she's real happy you brought this up.
No, yeah. It's,
I,
and
it's yeah.
I get crap for it all the time, no pun intended, that like
Woo!
all we talk about is poop. Like in my house, at my job, like it's all I do. So it's super important though, because the gut is literally connected to everything. And I can't tell you, I have a Hashimoto's webinar, thyroid webinar coming out, and I'm going to talk about gut. And a lot of people are like, what does that have to do with my gut? I just need medicine, or I need whatever vitamins. And it's like, no, you need to fix your gut, because you can't have a healthy thyroid without a healthy gut. You can't have a healthy gut without a healthy thyroid. So they totally go hand in hand. And with autoimmune and really any health condition, whether it's like a skin issue or and obviously a GI issue, there's always a gut component, a hormone issue, a weight loss issue, or
Mhm.
stubborn weight gain. There's always a gut component. So that's a piece. And then obviously blood work can be helpful for nutritional purposes. And then saliva, urine testing, there's lots of different things we can test for, just depending on what's necessary. So yeah, any fluid in your body, we can use it for something.
You've said autoimmune a few times, and just for listeners that are maybe have heard this word all the time and they're like, what does that exactly mean? It's my understanding autoimmune is basically your body's inability to distinguish itself from its, non-self fails. And
Yeah.
so you're attacking good cells as well as bad cells. And so you get into
Yeah.
this whole like kind of rock hard place kind of place to be in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of how I describe it. Is there
Yeah.
anything like specific as far as when it comes to autoimmune of why when you get people that have those normal labs and they don't have autoimmune and you're like, oh, okay, understanding that that's why you don't go straight to like gluten or carbs or dairy or nuts is good or bad. It's this idea of figuring out this dose response for
Right.
your body. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. I mean, there's several different types of like food sensitivity tests out there. Most of them are all the same. Most of them are IgG, and they have some useful capacity. I mean, there is research on them for IBS and migraines. That's pretty good. I just for autoimmune though, I never really got consistently great results. So I use it in my practice, but not as much anymore. I use another test that looks more at just overall inflammation.
Yeah.
It's a little bit, I don't want to say new. I mean, I think we've been using it for 10 or 15 years, but it's the similar technology of the guy who invented Alcat, and then they basically kind of upped the technology. So they're somewhat similar, but they look more upstream at various inflammatory markers. So anything that contributes to inflammation. So yes, I mean, I think it's totally important to look at rather than just randomly eliminating food groups. Now, again, if you can't afford testing, you haven't heard about testing, you don't have access to someone like me.
It's like you knew we were going to
Sure.
ask that. We were
Yeah,
like,
you can
okay,
Yes,
start.
I
You
am.
can
so
start.
now I'm
Right.
overwhelmed with the amount of testing.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
this is why we did the episode of getting to know your poop
Yeah. Right.
as one. But, what is the next step as far as saying, okay, well, I think I might have, I'm not diagnosed with an autoimmune. I might have some inflammation or,
Yeah.
sensitivities. How do I do this safely? How do I
Yeah.
not get pulled into this, Instagram
Yeah.
fitness person that I don't really know their background. They might not be
Yeah.
science
Right.
based, but they sound like what they know what they're doing. Maybe that's us. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding. In the sense of what would be step 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it
And
depends where
sorry,
someone
can I
is.
clarify
Yeah.
for a second?
Yeah.
Like, how would someone think they might have an inflammatory condition? Like, I think you guys are
Yeah.
kind of next level, and I'm like, I don't know what a
No,
lot
that's a
of
good
these words
That's a
are
great
question.
that we're
question. Yeah.
saying right now.
No,
So,
that's a perfect question. So basically inflammation, if you have any symptoms of any kind, it's inflammation. So anything
okay,
that's like kind of, chronic,
But
whether
inflammation
it's
isn't bad. So like
right,
that's where we want to make
right.
sure of like that's how your
Yeah,
body responds naturally to any sort
right.
of thing that happens. So like that
Mhm.
actually
right,
helps you heal. So just to
right,
put that
right.
out there, like if you
Yep.
hear inflammation, like like take a deep
Yeah.
breath.
It's just chronic. Chronic
There it
inflammation
is.
is not
Yeah.
good,
Yes.
but you
Yeah.
can
Thank
have
Okay.
you.
obviously like if you cut yourself, there's going to be inflammation to that site, which is your part of your healing response.
Right.
So I mean, I'll be honest, if someone, has a laundry list of symptoms that covers multiple body systems, that's where I'm thinking, okay, this is chronic inflammation. Now it could just be in one area like your joints or your thyroid or whatever, but a lot of people start to show over time, they start to show in multiple areas. And
Okay.
I'll be honest, if I'm talking to a client, here's a real conversation I would have. I think that, there's probably a gut component and we need to dig into that. From a food standpoint, totally depends where they are. But I have probably said to people, you can try cutting out gluten and dairy. Now it's not forever. It's not it doesn't mean necessarily butter forever. It doesn't mean cow and sheep and goat. Like it could just be maybe milk triggers you, maybe only
Mm-hmm.
cow products trigger you. But my point is, if people don't have that in their budget to do this extensive testing, but they know that like, if I look and they're eating a gluten dairy heavy diet, I might say just try taking it out for a couple weeks, and then but that's not forever, and then try putting it back in and see how you feel, because they are really really common triggers. And again, it's not because the food is bad, it's the quality of what we're eating and
Mm-hmm.
where it's coming from. And most people aren't, when they take wheat out of their diet, they're not removing heirloom einkorn homemade wheat bread from their diet. They're removing like, Taco Bell or like cookies or,
Yeah.
just junk. And so
Yeah.
it's not just the food itself, it's the quality of it. But in many cases, those can be, really common triggers. So if someone does, but with a purpose to try to bring it back in and to really test your response after that point is to your point, Sandy, that dose response.
I think too, you brought up a good point and you froze for just a little bit on my end. So I just
Oh,
wanted
sorry.
oh no, you're
Oh
good
yeah.
to clarify. of like, when you talk about the junk and the food and you're looking at, you know, a log review, maybe I'm ignorant saying, or maybe this is just my experience as the nutrition coach, and looking at and saying, oh, it's like I just said, the dosage amount, it's the amount of it. Like maybe you
Mhm.
have that inflammation for acute, you know, a one-time thing. Cause like you said, you lived in the jungle, you're having fresh fruits and vegetables off the tree, and then you had that McDonald's, like you can have that acute and inflammatory response and then be like, oh, okay, like my body's still functionally optimally. I have inner mechanisms to do its job, to do what it needed to do. And that's not that because again, we come back to this whole idea of shame and labeling. And it's just this thing inside of me of people saying, oh, well, McDonald's is bad.
Mhm.
Like, is it bad? Is it unhealthy? Or is it how many times you have it? Like, that's where I'd love to hear
Yeah.
your input of like, when you talk to clients of, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I deal with real people, and I realize that not everybody has the same goals, and that they don't feel confident in their ability to make food, or in their ability to travel and bring food, or whatever the case may be that causes those, fast food stops or gas station, stops or whatever. And so yeah, and actually probably what comes up more than anything, though, even more than those things, is alcohol and sugar. Those are the
ah,
those are the
Yeah.
things people don't want to get rid of, and they're like, okay, do I have to? I know you're going to tell me I have to get rid of this. I'm like, I'm really not, but I'm just saying, let's
Yeah.
for and again, I usually am working with people who aren't feeling well, right? So that's also different than someone who's optimally functioning and exercising and mostly taking care of their body. So it's kind of two different scenarios, but for the most part, I'm saying, okay, we're working on your gut. Guess what? If you have bacterial overgrowth in your gut, that bacteria loves sugar. So if you drink 4 nights a week, and 3 to 4 drinks 4 nights a week, you might be slowing down the process. But you know what? At the end of the day, if that's what you're going to do, it's not the end of the world either. It's not going to undo everything we're doing, but it may take a little bit longer to get there. So yeah, it's all about frequency and volume, whether we're talking about food sensitivities or whether we're talking about just triggers of gut issues and prolonged healing. So that's kind of where I stand, because I realize I think people kind of want me to say get it out, but then they're also scared at the same time. So I try
well,
to meet
Yeah.
them in the middle and say, like, if
yeah.
you
Yeah.
can, great, because sugar is not good for you. Fast food is not good for you. It's not doing anything. But if you're gonna be a head case about it, then go have it and get over it. And then let's work towards slowly, getting to a place where maybe those things aren't there every day or 4 times a week or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this in our
Yeah.
sugar episode of
Yeah.
Alex feeling like, you know, sugar is sugar and like your body's processing sugar however it is. So it, you know, I've had clients saying, I've worked with nutritionists and I work with dietitians, they say I can't have fruit or whatever. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like let's
No.
recap that and
Yeah.
say, no, it's the fact that maybe you were having all the fruit, but then you're also having the wine at night and you're also having that, you know,
Yeah.
this and
Yeah. The fruit's the least of your worries at
right.
that point.
Like it's sugar.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. It's
Yeah.
sugar. It has sugar in its biochemical makeup. Yet coming to your point of this idea of like, why do we go to this all or nothing? You know, and
Yeah.
it seems like for your family, it's worked well to go to the kind of all or nothing in the sense of you guys have just cut it out, but you have a very level head. And I think this is why we're going to be friends and continue to get along of like you said it about your kids, like you've providing this environment for your kids because you know that they have probably that genetic predisposition, yet at
Mhm.
the same time they're going to go out in the world and they shouldn't feel embarrassed or mad because you know that like yes, if you have a peanut allergy and have anaphylactic shock, like
Right.
that's a medical like
Yeah.
stay away, can't do that.
Yeah.
But if you are like, oh, I'm gonna be gassy, I'm gonna be, it's like, okay, well, honey, you're gonna have to
Right.
figure that one out. Like how, you know, and I
Yeah.
think that's key of you bringing that up of saying, we kind of, like you said, your clients, like they kind of want you to take it out because they want to be like, no, I got to be all or nothing. Yet at the same time, is that doable? I mean, how do you find that? And I think the best thing that you said is like, I work with real people.
Yeah.
So that's my little, I get super excited about hearing other people feeling and thinking that way. I think to just sum up and make it what I heard you say, as far as like, if there's 3 things to do to try and start an elimination diet, to just I think know your why. And I think that first one is what you said of like,
Yep.
help you figure out what's triggering you, what's making you sensitive. Because when you pull it, all out and then kind of get back in, you can kind of start being more aware. So step one helps you be more aware would be the pro.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
2, do you recommend them to do gluten, dairy, all of it at the same time? Or do you
usually one at a
it?
time, one at a time, unless they're really sick and, maybe I'll do gluten and dairy together, but usually it's one at a time. I think it just makes it easier if you're truly trying to, pull something out and true science, right? Like true research is like change one thing. You only change one variable, right? Not multiple, because then you can't tell which was which. So it's usually helpful to do one at a time. But in some cases, I'll do both if I think they have, if they have, sinus congestion, chronic yeast infections, diarrhea, or constipation. Like if they have multiple things hitting them, eczema, then we're probably taking them both out, at least for a short time. But it's easier if you do one at a time, for sure.
So if someone was listening and, kind of trying to do some of this on their own, is that what you would suggest, kind of like one at a time, like give it a break for a minute and see what happens?
It's just easier to tell how it's reacting. Otherwise it gets confusing, what's causing the problem.
Okay.
So awareness, do it because you want to become aware, not necessarily like, hey, I want to lose those last 5 pounds is what I'm doing. Right. Like all the time. 2, take it one thing at a time, document in the sense of gather data for yourself, whether that's you acknowledging how you feel differently or what's changing. And then the last thing, like the third tip, what would you say is like the third, like take this home with you? This is how I recommend it for people doing it on their own.
Eat as many foods as you can that don't trigger your symptoms. If you can have dairy or gluten or eggs or soy or preservatives or MSG once a week and not trigger your symptoms, great. If, again, it's a very slippery slope, right? Because I find this a lot with kids, we don't want to talk people into like, oh, she said it's fine and I can just eat fast food every day and like I don't feel bad. So I mean, it's a slippery slope, but in general, I would say incorporate as many whole foods as you can with some sort of, so that you can have variety without, triggering your symptoms, so that you don't get anxiety and have this restrictive mentality that I think is probably far more dangerous.
Girl. Quality and moderation. I think those are our takeaways.
Sure.
I have to ask this random question because on my way into this interview, I noticed that the shampoo that I recently bought for my kids, on the bottle, the shampoo says gluten-free, dairy-free, nut-free. I was like, what? This is shampoo. I'm like, are they joking or is that a real thing that people?
Well, it's a little excessive marketing, but there can be gluten in shampoo and it's actually sort of common because they'll put in like wheat germ or keratin that's derived from wheat. And I've actually had clients who like never thought of that. And they didn't understand why they couldn't get this, like they had this horrible rash all the time, like on their back or their torso. And it probably was because they were sensitive to gluten. So it's not, I mean, there are silly things though. Like I have a meme on that I posted a while ago on Instagram. It was like, I found this amazing thing at Whole Foods. It's gluten-free, dairy-free. It's called water, and it's like, you'll still find water that says gluten-free. It's like, come on people, or like carrots, So it is kind of excessive and kind of silly sometimes, but that would actually be, if I'm being picky, like an example that could actually make sense and help somebody.
Okay. No, cool. I love it. I feel like I need like a true or false. We need another episode of like true or false Mythbusters. Like I love it. I just never.
Mine of that, which is kind of similar but different. I have anaphylactic shock to menthol. So it's a very weird, just one thing. Vicks Vapor Rub did not help me. It made me choke. But I dated a guy in college who his body wash had menthol in it. And every time I hugged him or kissed him, I had like a cough attack. Like I would just like, and we joked that like I was allergic to him. Till I slept over, took a shower, and was like, why am I coughing? And I looked and I was like, mother effer, like your body wash has menthol in it. So like totally understand of like now somebody who's like, like on the, like you said, the large scale, most people aren't going to have that reaction to having gluten in their hair or, you know, like in their shampoo. So I didn't think about like until you said that about the shampoo. I'm like, oh yeah, I had that.
Yeah.
Love that. So again, do an elimination diet because you want to gain more awareness about you, your body, your functioning, yourself. Take it one step at a time. And then at the end, figure out the dose response is what I'm hearing you say. Like,
try to reincorporate things.
It is.
Yeah, because when the body calms down, when the inflammation calms down, sometimes those sensitivities they're not usually permanent. Like the immune system is not static, it's totally dynamic. And so once all the inflammation calms down, you can sometimes, and often I would say, reintroduce foods.
Awesome.
Well, you're amazing. And I'm totally going to want to talk about all the different things with you, but we can't do it all today. So thank you.
Rhya, so tell us more. If someone wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that? Where can we find you?
Sure. So social media, obviously I'm on Instagram, Facebook.
I love your Instagram. So many good tips. Yeah.
Thank you. I have an upcoming Hashimoto's webinar. If you want that type of a setting, it's more of a group setting. It can be a great access point if you don't want to do one-on-one coaching or you don't want to pay for one-on-one coaching. And then I do offer one-on-one coaching via telehealth. I have a secured video platform that I use. I can't work in all states in the United States, but in many states I can. Depends on licensure laws in those states. But you can also find me on my website is carolinafunctionalnutrition.com, and you can check me out there too.
And the handle for Instagram?
Carolina Functional Nutrition.
All right.
On Facebook and Instagram.
Gonna lie,
yeah.
When Alex told me she wanted to talk to a functional nutritionist, I was like, oh. And then I looked you up on the website and I was like, oh, she legit. Okay, let's do this.
I know. I told you. I knew.
To you, I'm like, all right, she did say this whole reset, detox, whatever. But here's the thing. It's like, there's a lot of BS out there, people, and you got to do the digging and find people that know what they're talking about. And
and you have to meet people where they are. And that was that's my way of like, okay, it's January and you're going to do something crazy with your body. Let me show you a non-damaging, like, but with the words and the verbiage that they understand. And so that's kind of where I have to try to meet people in the middle, because people would always ask me for stuff like that. And I'm like, I got to come up with something. And so that was my solution, because again, I deal with real people who hear things and read things and they don't know, they just are looking for an answer. So so thank you for
thank you and
taking that label.
This is awesome.
Yes, and thank you for getting comfortably uncomfortable and keeping it real, because that's what it's about. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you for showing up today. Getting awkward is always more fun with friends. Give us a review, tag us, and share us so we can continue to grow together.
Use hashtag CUPod, letter C, letter U, or tag us. You can find Sandy on Instagram at sweatandshineon and Alex at aj.afterbabyfit on Instagram and afterbabyfit on Facebook and YouTube. We'll see you next time.